And this week on The Quad, we're going to be discussing the missiles from the Houthis on Ben-Gurion Airport, what is going on with the Iranian talks, and of course, the ongoing situation in Gaza, as well as many scumbags and merry heroes, only on JNS, only on The Quad. And welcome back, everybody, to The Quad here in our Jerusalem studios after an incredible JNS conference last week, which we all enjoyed. Incredible content, great people. But now we're back in the studio with my wonderful co-host, Emily Schrader, Iranian expert, human rights activist, and journalist. Shoshanna Keats Jaskoll, the founder of Chokhmat Nashim, elevating Orthodox women voices and fighting discrimination, and a wonderful guest co-host this week, Raquel Karamson, who is a sergeant in reserve duty, a government spokesperson, and the director and founder of her own media company, Impact 21. All right, ladies, a lot to unpack, but let's start with what happened yesterday. My God, the Houthis, who have been constantly attacking us for over a year, went that step too far and threw a missile that landed in the airport. Now, miracle, because in this country, you know, we have to believe in miracles because there's no other way that we've been here and still hold on. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. Thankfully, no planes exploded. Unfortunately, some foreign airline companies have decided to take a beat for a few days. Thank God for a lull. And the Americans continue attacking the Houthis. We know that their Iranian paymasters are in charge of that. And then at the same time, the American government is negotiating with the Iranians in Oman. So what is going on? Emily, as our resident Iranian expert, but also Houthi enthusiast.
Houthi enthusiast, that's
Yes.
a new title. That's a new one for me. I mean, it's the same old, same old. It just so happens that they hit something more significant this time. But I think what's more telling is, and by the way, this is the 27th ballistic missile since March.
From the Houthis.
From the Houthis alone. So this is not a new thing. It's just new that they actually hit something, and you know,
we didn't.
No defense. Yes, no defense system is hermetic.
100%.
Like it's gonna happen some of the time.
Yeah.
And so the more they fire, the more likely it is that we're gonna see this kind of activity. So it's not really a surprise. Obviously, it's concerning. I think actually a couple of people were injured, but like lightly injured.
Yeah.
There was actually a video of a girl who got there. Like the explosion was right behind her, and you can see she gets thrown from the video. It was making the rounds on social media after this attack, but. Yeah, I mean, this is something that we've been dealing with for a while, and this is what happens when you don't deal with the root of the problem, which is the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I want to add one more thing about that's related to Iran. All week, there's been explosions across Iran in multiple cities from negligent accidents.
Yes.
I think that's the most likely scenario. This wasn't actually sabotage, even though a lot of these facilities were involved with the IRGC and with the regime in Iran. But the fact that they're so negligent that this happens in like 6 different cities at once is insane. It's insane. And it just speaks to the fact that they're prioritizing sending all of their resources, all of their money, all of their focus is on their terror proxies, which is why you saw, and I think we'll put up a picture of it, but why you saw the new banner in Palestine Square in Tehran, which was praising the Houthis yesterday. So they don't have electricity in Iran. They don't have water in Iran. They're killing Iranians on the ground inside of Iran with their negligence in these different explosions that are happening. But they have enough time and money to put up a new banner in Palestine Square.
Well, the Houthis are also starving their own people. Our friend Luay Ahmed, who was at the conference last week, who is Yemenite and who's here with us at the moment in Israel, he says all the time, they are going through starvation.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. And they still have, apparently, the resources to keep throwing rockets.
Remind you of anyone?
But here we
Does
are.
it remind you of anyone?
Yes.
Our close neighbors, Hamas, who are also putting all of their resources into throwing rockets and terror tunnels and harming the Jewish people, while their people suffer. Yes, there's actual starvation going on in Yemen and has been for years, and ain't nobody given no shit. So I don't understand all the screaming and all the flotillas happening, and nobody actually cares about starving children unless you can blame it on the Jews.
Yeah.
That we've seen this movie before. But I want to say something about yesterday. My husband is emergency services, so we always get there's a siren here, siren here, siren here, siren here. And often they try to give you now there's a whole new system where they give you there might be sirens soon in your area, so you can get ready for the siren that's coming.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he's getting these, and it's like all these doesn't make sense how it's traveling so fast, so wide. And I'm like, something is weird. Like something's actually not right here. So it turns out that that was shot over Saudi Arabia, meaning one interception was tried over Saudi Arabia and it completely missed. We actually hit, from what I understand, the rocket, but not the warhead. So we hit the rocket, knocked it, and then the warhead fell. Oh. And that's why you had all of these, warnings, all this, meaning they thought it was going to be hit here. It wasn't. They thought it was going to be here. So all of these areas were getting it, but it actually fell there. And when the siren didn't happen in Ben-Gurion until there was actually a fall. So our systems really try to work with the Israeli government's incredible, the IDF's incredible, trying to make us as safe as possible. But as Emily said, no defense system is perfect, especially when things are unpredictable. And thank God we have God, because I'm sorry, guys, you can or not, you don't have to believe in God, but that was a miracle. Ben-Gurion Airport is like this.
Yes.
There's an orange grove between the switching that we all wind up, damn it, I missed the exit. And you have to go all around the orange grove, and that's where it hit. There's a crater there. A crater.
It's like 20 meters deep.
Right. But even our defense system, even the people who manufacture the defense system say they can only guarantee 90%. And we
I think we're at 95%.
About 95, 98, 97.
Yeah.
What we did when the Iranians sent all those ballistic missiles.
Amazing.
So
we also have the THAAD system, which, by the way, in this case also missed. They also tried to intercept it after Saudi Arabia and missed. So the Saudis missed, the Americans missed, and they also said maybe there was some kind of malfunction on the actual interceptor that we fired.
Oh, really?
That there may have been something with the actual device.
I don't know if we'll ever know.
As Ben-Gurion once said, to be a realist in this country, you have to believe in miracles. Raquel,
I'm absolutely with Shoshana. There is an element of this that absolutely has to be God, because it's not for lack of trying. They keep trying. What people don't understand is because, like you said, we're so well defended. People are like, okay, another missile, another missile.
Yes.
It's only because we're so well defended. It's not for their lack of trying.
Exactly.
Of course, when I saw the videos coming out on social media, you're right. I don't remember which one of you said. It hit, and then the alarms went off at the airport because of the way that this happened. And so I was seeing these things on social media, and I was like, the airport? And I was just so stunned, because I get so accustomed to just being safe, to knowing it's okay, to telling my daughter, oh, don't worry, you'll be in the shelter for a few minutes, you'll be out, it'll be okay. So just to add some context, the US has been hitting the Houthis, as we know, and it has diminished their capabilities. I heard up to 60%.
Really?
But that doesn't mean that they ever give up. That's what people need to understand about the Middle East.
Yeah.
They're never gonna give up. Doesn't matter what we do, doesn't matter what anyone does, doesn't matter if their people are starving and live on $2 a day. Yeah. None of that matters. They're never gonna give up. And they're praising this as a victory, only because our defenses happen not to catch the whole thing.
I completely agree, and I always say, just because we can defend ourselves, it doesn't mean they're not attacking us.
Exactly.
And I think the world got used to the fact that we're so resilient, that we're so strong, we're so this. But I just want to remind everyone, when people talk about Judea and Samaria or the West Bank, let's just remind everyone that if the Hamas were controlling or will control the West Bank, or if we actually gave that away, they would be sending rockets to Ben-Gurion every day. And this country economically would be done. So this is just a little reminder of what it is to have rockets coming from Hamas, rockets coming from Yemen, rockets coming from Iran. Imagine if the rockets were coming from 2 kilometers from Ben-Gurion Airport. What would they do?
Well, I mean, we do have that we know that Iran has been smuggling weapons into the West Bank to different terror groups there, both Hamas groups and Islamic Jihad, which are existent in the West Bank, but we just do a lot to combat them because there's occupation. Yes. So because there's military occupation, we are able to prevent a lot of the attacks, a lot of the buildup of weapons. And this is something that I think people don't understand. When you hear occupation, you think, oh my God, it's bad. And that's not the case historically. I mean, even legally speaking, there is an argument to be made for this. And if the alternative is more people dying and more civilians dying, then it's not something anyone should support,
But I think the core of the problem is exactly what Raquel is saying. Ultimately, their aim is destruction. their aim is not.
That's
I don't
their
think their aim
purpose.
is. Their purpose is not a state for themselves.
No.
I always say, and it's something the Bibi says continuously, and he's right. The problem isn't that there is no Palestinian state. The problem is that there's a Jewish state, which they cannot accept is here and will stay. That's the core of the problem. The minute you have a Palestinian leadership, and we all want to dream that someday this may happen, where's your Mandela? Where? The moment you have a leadership that has accepted that Israel's not going away, that's the moment we're going to have peace. They're not there yet, and neither is the region. And this is why we just have to get rid of, like you say, the head of the snake. But Shoshanna, you made a good point about, in fact, the starvation of the people. At the moment, Israel has been accused of starving people in Gaza because we've decided to cut the access to humanitarian aid that was going, not to people, to Hamas. And Hamas was selling it at a big premium to the people to continue funding their terrorists because they get salaries to be a terrorist. It's kind of lucrative to have a job as a terrorist in Gaza. And so we're trying to cut the funding to Hamas. And so what the Israeli army is trying to do is create humanitarian zones where only women and children and non-Hamas people can go in and get their supplies. And what's happening? All these humanitarian aid organizations are fighting with us about, no, we're not doing this and we're not doing that. If you really cared so much about the Gazans, then why are you putting conditions on how it is that we should manage making humanitarian aid accessible? Emily, you've got some experience with this whole subject. Do you see what's going on there?
I mean, I think it's ridiculous. We also see Hamas shooting some of the Palestinians who are taking aid. Now, they claim, they stole it. Well, if they stole it, then what did Hamas do to get it in the first place? So I'm not buying that excuse. But yeah, there's been a lot of violence of Hamas against Palestinians on the ground there. And the international hypocrisy on the entire issue of cutting off water, electricity, or the other things that Israel has previously provided that it did not need to in a state of war. It's ridiculous. And just another example that literally just popped into my head now. I mean, I remember this week, there's all this conflict between Pakistan and India after the terrible terror attack in Kashmir against Hindus there. And you see just a few days ago that India cut off water to some of those areas. And nobody knows this. No one's talking about
UN
this.
resolution?
There's no encampments on American campuses. There's no protests in the streets. Strange how that works.
And nobody talks about, does India have the right to exist? Because it was created the same year, maybe a year before Israel, but nobody talks about, does India have a right to exist?
In a very similar manner.
Yes.
Yep.
The humanitarian aid thing, people ask all the time, like when I was a government spokesperson, they ask, is this a strategy by Israel not to? There is a strategy actually not to provide humanitarian aid, but it's not by Israel. On December 11th, 2023, a young Palestinian boy was shot for trying to get aid.
Yeah.
And the Hamas spokesperson, I forgot his name at the moment, he came out and said, the food is for the fighters.
Yes.
And if the fighters are done, then they will give it to the people. So it was a strategy from the beginning by Hamas.
Yes.
So it's always been a strategy. So whenever I get asked that question, I'm like, yes, it's a strategy by Hamas.
But it's just part of the larger strategy. I think people really, despite the fact that we say this all the time, people outside of this region don't stop for 1 second their own worldview.
Yeah.
This is not America. It's not Europe. It's just not. The things that you think people want here, they don't.
Yep.
The things that you think they dream of, they don't.
Yep.
Yeah.
If Hamas is looking to destroy Israel, which it is, anything justifies that, which means starving its people, which means taking the aid. That's what it's about. And we are fighting people who don't care about their people. So for us, we're being held to the standard of you can't, you have to, and we're fighting for our lives. And people don't understand that. Since the very beginning, it's not ever been about a Palestinian state. It has only been about destroying Israel. And if that's the case, we're simply not going to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
They're making the rules. We're playing by them.
I mean, it's a problem that, and I know this is a pressure point for a lot of people when it comes to Israel, but the fact that the entire Palestinian identity came into existence because they hated us is insane. Like the whole Arab-Palestinian identity did not exist until the 1960s. It was not a thing. 1948, there were no Palestinians, or if they were, if that word was used, it was referring to the British mandate to Jews. Palestinian football team, Jews. The Palestinian Philharmonic, Jews. The Palestine Post, which is now Jerusalem Post, Jews. Right. All of it was Jews. And people aren't even aware of this historically, especially the Arab world. Yeah. This is the craziest part. They'll go on about how Palestinians have thousands of years of history. No, they don't. No. Arabs do. Which is why I think it's legitimate to negotiate about these issues and to debate over who should get what land and who should live where. Fine. But Palestinian, this is something that was invented for the purpose of hating Israel. And we can't pretend that that's not the reality. It can change. Palestinians exist today. I recognize them. Other people don't. I understand that. But that is its roots. And the longer we pretend that that's not the case, the more problematic it is.
Absolutely.
Especially when they're trying to usurp our roots and our connection to the land.
It's Darvo.
Even though we have always been the ones prepared to share it, whether you agree or not, we've tried. And that's really the situation.
You know who does have roots here? Just to segue very nicely into the Druze.
Very Shoshanna. Absolutely.
Yeah, we have to talk about what's going on.
Absolutely. Shoshanna, so you're right. The Druze in the Syrian side of the border, the Druze are Asian people that come from the tribe of Jethro, who was the father-in-law of Moses, an incredible leader. And they are people who are loyal to the land that they're in. And lucky for us in Israel, they are loyal to Israel. They serve in the army in combat units even higher than Jews. And many of them have sacrificed their lives in this war and in many wars. And so we are indebted to our brothers and sisters from the Jews community. And now what's happening is that with this Al-Jilani dude on the other side of the border, he is ferociously attacking Druze villagers who are, of course, connected because they're the same people to the Druze on our side of the border. And so Israel, about a week ago, had, I guess, a moral dilemma or perhaps a military dilemma. Do we go and defend people who are on the other side? They're not in Israel, but they are connected to the people that are on our side here. And we're very pleased to say that.
They did.
They did.
They did. They struck the mobs that were going to continue attacking the Druze. I think there were well over 100 Druze who were slaughtered, unfortunately, sadly, horribly. And it was wonderful to see Israelis and Jews and non-Jews on social media pressing, saying, we're with the Jews, you gotta do something, And I'm not saying that the IDF listens to social media, but for me, it was wonderful to see because, I went to Majdal Shams after the horrific.
You went to the mourning tent.
I don't know, I don't know the last time I was so moved by a people as a whole. They are incredible, and they are our brothers and sisters, and I'm so proud of us for actually going in. And not only did we strike, but we also brought in injured to our hospitals, helicoptered them over into...
We also brought them supplies.
Oh yeah, we also brought them supplies. Forgot about that.
But I think that the Druze leaders are basically asking Israel to just take over.
They have been for a while.
They've been for a while saying just...
The Golan communities.
The Golan communities.
The Syrian Golan communities.
The Syrian,
the ones closer to Damascus, they're kind of divided.
Yes.
But you also have to remember it's happening in the context of living under a dictatorship, and a dictatorship that has oppressed them for thousands of years in the Middle East. So I'm not surprised to see here and there that there's comments like, oh, we're loyal to Al-Jilani. We'll make a deal with Jolani because what choice do they have? You know what I mean? But I was also immensely proud to see Israel stepping up on that front. It was the right thing to do. And even militarily, yes, it's humanitarian, but even militarily was the right thing to do when we're talking about the threat to us, because the Druze in Syria are the front line. I mean, if they continue slaughtering the Druze the way that they intend to, the Golan Heights is next, and then they're going to come for Israel next. So it makes sense on every front, humanitarian, morally, and militarily as well.
Yeah. I mean, we went into Lebanon, really. We got into the fight when those 11 children were slaughtered. That's when Israel said, that's it. That's our red line.
Enough is enough. I absolutely agree with you on, the Druze, our brothers and sisters. I think before the Abraham Accords, they were the one people in the Middle East that acted truly like family. Everyone jokes that we're all cousins here in the Middle East, but they are the only ones that, and I grew up here and I served in the army with a lot of Druze, members of the Druze community, and they truly act like family. They do act like our cousins. They have always stood by us and we have stood by them. And when I saw the hesitation, I was thinking to myself, I wonder what's behind it, because as you know, there's a lot of call-ups right now for the operation in Gaza. And I think, you know, the military has a lot of things to weigh when they make these decisions. Obviously, I'm not in the military making that decision, but I think it was the right thing to do no matter what. Even if it was going to put, you know, maybe a strain, even if it was, whatever it is, it's the right thing to do because they are absolutely family. They have always stood by us. They have always acted like that.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, it is absolutely the right thing to do. And I'm so proud as an Israeli to see that we've taken that stand and we've stood up for them.
I also want to note, just for the record, that when it comes to the international community in Syria, they have failed the Syrian people for many, many years, both left and right governments in Europe, United States, Canada, everybody. And I don't know if I'm sure you do remember, but when Obama even was president, he said, this is the red line if Assad uses chemical weapons.
Yes.
And he used chemical weapons on little kids in Syria.
Yeah.
And nobody did anything. Nobody did anything.
No
they talk and they talk and they talk and they talk. And the only country that has ever done anything on this front is the state of Israel when it comes to a humanitarian cause like this. And it's really important to remember because so often Israel is portrayed as the polar opposite. And it's simply not the case.
Absolutely.
We are the ones who are defending these minority groups in the Middle East, while the West is sitting around having negotiations in Rome or anywhere else with the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Yes, and imposing impossible standards on us when we are honestly the police people of this neighborhood. And it was thanks to Obama's leaving Syria, forgetting his red line, that Putin came in. Let's not forget about that, because there's never a vacuum of power, people. Never. True.
But Israel is not only supportive militarily, you said humanitarianly, whenever there was an earthquake, Syria, Turkey, whatever, we don't care what the relationship is. We do really care about the people. And we send help in any form that we can. So it's not a new thing for Israel to be supportive and in the region to anyone who will accept our help.
And not just that, but to benefit the entire world. I actually posted something about this a few days ago, but I do think it's important also to note that we were right about all of these things that we've done, the operations that we've carried out, when everybody else whined about it and complained and said, Israel, don't do that. That's bad. Don't bomb the nuclear reactor in Iraq. Don't bomb the nuclear reactor in Syria. Can you imagine if Assad had nuclear weapons? Like they get mad at us for doing all of these things that they don't have the courage and the moral strength to do, even when they have the military might, especially in the case of the United States. So like either shut up or join us. Those are your choices.
You are welcome, world. And now, as every week, we wade through the sea of scumbags that unfortunately are all around the region and the world. And and here we are to call them out. So watch out. Shoshanna, who's your scumbag this week?
My scumbags are two people. I think one is a Temple University student, and the other, I'm not quite sure if they've been identified yet, who decided to say F the Jews and put up a sign in a bar in Pennsylvania. And the two waitresses who assisted them in doing it. What the hell? I mean, I feel like I say that every week. What the hell? Like, obviously, what were you thinking? You were thinking that F the Jews and that people would go along with it. I have to say, you can have any political opinion you want. You can believe the sky is green and you could believe that all the world is Palestine. But saying F the Jews is clearly anti-Semitic. It is not pro-Palestinian. It's not even anti-Zionist. It's just plain anti-Semitism. I'm glad that you've taken off your masks and you should all just walk around saying F the Jews so we know who you are easily. Take off your masks, people. Take off those things so that we know exactly who you are. You're my scumbags.
Well, very worthy scumbags indeed. Okay, Raquel, for your first time ever.
Yes, my first
scumbag of the week.
This is my favorite segment, I have to say. And you guys did it at the JNS conference. You did a special version of it, yeah. Okay, so my scumbag needs a little bit of explaining because it's a little bit multi-layered.
Okay.
So first, before we get to the scumbag, I have an honorable mention, as they say.
Right.
A shame on you.
Right.
And my shame on you is, I don't know if you guys have seen this protest letters. So-called protest letters that have come out recently, about a month ago.
Right.
It got a lot of attention, not so much obviously in the Hebrew media, But these letters were written by former IDF personnel. And when I say former, I mean people who are 50, 60, 70, and 90 years old, who came out with these protest letters. It was like 1,200 people, maybe 1,500 people, who came out with these letters saying that, we shouldn't be serving in Gaza. They're going to refuse to serve in Gaza, that what we're doing is collective punishment, and all these buzzwords. But so that's my, how dare you, or my shame on you, because right now, and it's related to my heroes, I'll explain the other part later, what's going on, I think it's, as an former IDF soldier, it is absolutely, like, even if you have beef, there's a time and a place.
Yeah.
This is not it. Yeah. Not while we're in the middle of the war, not while our, brothers and sisters are on the front line serving. But the scumbag of this story is the media who ran with this story.
Israeli media.
No, the international media.
International.
It was covered by some significant media.
Of course.
Obviously, Reuters and the usual suspects. But it was like, I would not think that this would get coverage, because when they would look into it, they would see these people are 80, 90 years old saying, I'm not going to serve, I'm not going to show up to, fly in the Air Force. You haven't been doing that for 20, 30 years. What are you talking about?
Sir, you're 75 years old.
You can barely see.
So not doing their journalistic due diligence here and publishing these stories hurts everyone. It's dangerous. First of all, journalistically, this is ridiculous. And secondly, to what's going on in the war, these men and women that are serving, it is absolutely a slap in the face. So they're my scumbag of the week.
I think that they're worthy scumbags. And let me tell you, when you look at certain mainstream media, what you see is a voice for the pro-Hamas side, and then you see some crazy Israeli. No, this is what they consider balance.
Yeah.
You see some real hater, and this is supposed to be balance.
Right.
And this happens again and again and again. My sister, she watches Sky News, and she's like, Fleur, you don't understand. They've got the pro-Hamas guy, and then they've got one of these people who signed this letter supposedly in the name of balance. It's ridiculous.
I think if you're at that age, 80, 90 years old, even 67 years old, have a seat. You had your time. It's not your time. Have a seat.
People, they just don't want to go. Nobody's interested in what you have to say anymore. You were there. It was your period. Over.
How do you really feel? I was just going to say that the media does the same thing with Iran. It's funny, they'll present it as, the pro-regime side and the side that pretends that they're not pro-regime, but they are. And the voice of the Iranian people is
nowhere.
Yeah.
Nowhere in Western media.
Yeah.
My scumbag this week is part of the whole woke right movement. We've had this week quite a few people on the right waxing and waning on social media about how they're not going to support a war. It's not in the interest of America to have a war in Iran. They know nothing about Iran, probably couldn't even find it on a map, but they are intelligent enough and educated enough about the Middle East to claim that it's not in American interest to have a war in Iran. What that actually means, they have no idea, because nobody is talking about having an invasion of Iran in the style of Iraq or Afghanistan or anything else. They're totally different countries, or Vietnam. Totally different countries, totally different histories. Iran isn't even an Arab country. So it drives me crazy when I see some of these people saying things like, well, we're not going to repeat what happened with Iraq. No, we're not, because that's never been on the table. And it's not the job of the Western world or the United States or anyone else to do regime change in Iran. It's the job of the Iranian people. And they will do it if we stop propping up the terrorists who are leading that country. But specifically, my scumbags, we have Matt Walsh, who decided after stating on a podcast that he didn't know enough about this, then suddenly he did know enough on X to make a comment. It must be nice to have that level of naivete, like the privilege to say things like it's not in the interest of the American people because Iran doesn't threaten the United States. Believe me, it does. The mullahs in Iran feel very differently than you, not to mention all of the families with dead American soldiers as a result of terror proxies of the Islamic Republic of Iran and direct attacks from the Islamic Republic of Iran on American bases throughout the world. We also have Charlie Kirk, who opened his mouth about this despite knowing nothing. Thank God we have Mark Levin, who was my hero last week, to put him in his place. And then, of course, we have the horseshoe theory in action, because we have Cenk, my best friend Cenk from all my debates on Piers Morgan, that scholar of Iran and the Middle East. Yeah. So him agreeing with Marjorie Taylor Greene's, Miss Jewish Space Lasers, about why we shouldn't have a war with Iran, and we're all on the same page about this. And it's disturbing, though not surprising, to see these people agreeing with each other. It's like any sort of totalitarian, oppressive ideology. They're like, yeah, we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Like, you really see this horseshoe theory in action. So woke right, woke left, these people, you're my scumbags of the week.
And quite justifiably, it's absolutely ridiculous. But there you go. That just shows how ridiculous they are. And like Douglas Murray, our friend, has been saying already for a few weeks since he was on Joe Rogan, everybody's an expert. And then when you call them out, they're like, well, I'm no expert. Well, then shut up.
Yes.
If you're no expert, because you're doing a lot of damage. Agreed. Thank you, Emily. Worthy scumbag indeed. All right. So mine is, not surprisingly, Harvard University. And now we have a 311-page document, little investigation that they did on themselves, I'll give them the credit for that, to show how bad they are, how for decades they've been tolerating pure anti-Semitism, pure indoctrination, pure everything you can imagine. 60% of Jewish students at Harvard have declared that they feel intimidated, they feel discriminated, they feel bullied for being Jewish. And Harvard, apart from this report, has done nothing about it except empower the bullies and the haters. And the reason they're my scumbags is that even after the report of this task force, which they put together, there's been no remorse. Maybe I've missed it. There's been no regret. And there's been no, oh, what can we do to fix this? No, just barefaced, ugly 311 pages of how they have failed Jewish students. And you know what? What starts with the Jews does not end with the Jews. This is the beginning of the end for the most prestigious organization in the world. And I'm very happy that President Trump has declared that he's not going to give them the federal funding that they normally get, because this, if it was any other minority, they'd be shut down in 5 minutes.
They're revoking the tax-exempt status as well.
They're revoking the tax-exempt status, so you better get used to living on your very, very large endowment, because you're going to need it for a long time. Harvard, and I want to quote Shabbos Kestenbach, who said something very smart, and I agree with him. He said, the Jews don't need Harvard, Harvard need the Jews. So when you stop winning those Nobel Prizes, and when you stop getting all those unicorns coming out of your university for the inventions that Jews work hard towards, don't come crying to us. It happened in Germany, it happened in Spain, it'll happen to you. Harvard University, you're my scumbag of the week. All right. Oof. And finishing with positive vibes, we always have heroes. Who are our heroes this week? Let's start with you, Raquel. Who's your hero this week?
So my hero this week, like I said, ties into my scumbag in this sense. It is the warriors, the men and women, our brothers and sisters of the IDF and their families, who, I mean, we lost 2 more soldiers, unfortunately. Every time when I was a spokesperson that I had to announce the deaths, it was so difficult. And I know a lot of these families who are, the moms are both working, taking care of the kids, doing everything they can. They have bills mounting, and our men and women are on the front lines, and they get it. They are the ones who get it. And they're the ones who are out there giving their lives that we can live our lives, you know? And I say this to my daughter all the time, almost every day as she wakes up. I'm like, have a moment and think about them when you're on your way to school today, because it's because of them that you're allowed to plan the next party, plan your birthday, plan your bat mitzvah. It is because of their sacrifice. And so they are my hero this week and every week.
Beautiful, Raquel. And you're absolutely right. They're the ones who feel the sacrifice. Some guys have been, in Miluim for 300 days. That's the most part of a year. Imagine what's going on with their careers, with their livelihoods.
Some of them haven't met their new babies.
Some of them haven't met their babies. Absolutely. There are heroes, like you say, every day and every week. Shoshanna.
So my hero is an unlikely hero, but Dave Portnoy, who I think like a lot of Jews have kind of found their Jewishness and it's had to come to the forefront because they've been put in a situation where they can either say, well, I'm not that kind of Jew, or they can be like, yeah, I'm that Jew, which Dave Portnoy has done now. Dave Portnoy is the owner of the bar that was tied into my scumbags, where people decided that F the Jew was a good idea to put up on the board. And he came out with this video. He is he's offered to send the 2 students to Auschwitz, which is not in Germany, it's in Poland, but that's okay. To send them to Auschwitz to educate them on Jew hatred. I would say to you, Dave, maybe also the waitresses, like, don't leave them behind just because they're girls, just because they work for you. Like, let them go and also see what happened. Because I have something to say. The people who actually put that sign up or told the waitresses to do it, it's their fault. Okay? The waitresses were your employees and maybe felt like they were in a really difficult situation. I'm not saying they shouldn't have said no. They should have said no. But they also deserve and should, having been put in that position, be allowed to go and be educated. Because I want to tell you something. Asra Nomani, who is an incredible person, and the work that she does is incredible with the Daniel Pearl Foundation, Daniel Pearl Project, who was, maybe you don't remember, but he was a journalist who was beheaded. Yeah. And his last words were, I am a Jew, my mother's a Jew, my father's a Jew, and then he was killed for being Jewish. So she said, just for a minute, I'd like to give you wider context on what happened at Barstool, Philadelphia. This isn't about 220-somethings acting out in 2025 with F the Jews sign. When you identified one student, Mohammed Adnan Khan, as a Temple University student, I wasn't surprised. This is about a long war that has lasted at least 60 years in the making against Jews and Israel. And she has an incredible tweet that everyone should look at and really follow her to understand the wider context, Dave. You have an opportunity here. Your platform is massive. Learn, educate others. This is the moment, perhaps, that you were created for. Like Esther had her moment, this is your moment. Thank you for being a proud Jew. Thank you for saying that you want to do something as opposed to just sweeping it under the rug. And I ask you to even take it further.
Nice, Shoshanna. Maybe we should get him here.
Come up, you're invited.
And on the court, of course.
Bo.
Emily, who's your hero this week?
So my hero is a kind of difficult one to talk about, but Mia Shem, the former hostage of Hamas, kidnapped on October 7th, released after 50-some days. She's been quite courageous in speaking out about this. She, I believe, was the first female hostage to talk about sexual harassment and sexual assaults, though not in detail. And unfortunately, her nightmare hasn't really ended, despite the fact that she is not in captivity anymore. And that is because she gave a very, very brave interview this week on Israel's Channel 12 about something that happened to her a couple of, I guess it was weeks ago or months ago already. She's in the process of writing about what happened to her in captivity and her experience. And she had this celebrity trainer in Israel, an Israeli, who offered to connect her with some producer in Hollywood to discuss telling her story, which naturally she agreed. And unfortunately, this was not the case. The trainer had allegedly, made up this relationship he has with some producer in order to put this former hostage in an extremely vulnerable position in her own home, where she had agreed to meet the producer so that she would have some degree of privacy. And as she spoke about on TV, at some point, she believes that she was drugged, some kind of date rape drug, and that there was some sort of sexual assault that occurred. She did file a police report, did a rape kit, all of this. It's in process. It's something that's being investigated, that's being handled by the police. But I just have to say, watching her interview, I was incredibly moved by her courage, incredibly saddened that this happened at the first place, that someone, even in our own society, and every society has pieces of shit, sorry. Every society has them, so you can't judge an entire society based on this. But the fact that despite this, that this young woman is so resilient and so able to see clearly, despite being in an unimaginably difficult and painful situation after everything that she has been through, to go on national TV and to know how people respond when women speak out about sexual assault and rape, and to know that people will say, well, why were you there? Well, why did you drink something? Well, what were you wearing? And to say, I did nothing wrong. I am a victim in this situation, and I have a right to tell my story and speak out about what happened to me. endless respect. And I think the whole country should stand behind this woman And for a long time, I think Israel has been lacking in dealing with a lot of issues of chauvinism, of sexual assault, of domestic violence, of all of these issues in the state of Israel. It's something, one of the few things that I've been very outspoken about, criticizing the state of Israel on this issue. And there have been several scandals like this, but this is by far the worst. And I think that this is not only important to handle this specific investigation, but also to look into, as a society, how are we viewing women? How are we speaking about women? How are we protecting women? And what are we teaching men? What are we teaching men about how to treat women, about what's acceptable? What is having respect? Even what is consent? And I don't mean some nonsense of, woke nonsense, nothing like this. But, there's the other extreme too. Yeah. And while Israel is nothing close to the challenges of women in the rest of the Middle East, we still have a long way to go. And this is should be a wake-up call for the whole society to pay attention to what we've been saying and to educate your boys and young men to behave with respect towards women and to recognize a problem that exists right in front of them instead of sweeping it under the rug continuously for decade after decade after decade after more and more women are killed as a result of domestic violence or suffer sexual assault or are victims of revenge porn. All of these have been issues, not just in Israel, but around the world. But it's something that we as a society here have to deal with and have to deal with better. So Mi Hashem, you're my hero. You are a hero for many, many, many women here in the state of Israel, and hopefully many men as well. And we are sending you love and support.
Wow, what a story. For God's sake, what a predatorial piece of garbage, this guy. Yeah. To pick on a woman who spent over 50 days in Hamas captivity. Who the hell is this person? Honestly, how?
And how is she not destroyed? Not knowing who to trust, it's horrific. She needs to be, I'm worried for her.
She spoke very candidly about this. She spoke very candidly about this. That, it's not, in captivity, she expected to face these kinds of situations.
Exactly.
So she was prepared. And she said, the problem with this situation is that I don't even remember what happened. I don't know the full extent of what happened to me in my own home.
That's horrible.
After being released from captivity. And so it's unbelievably painful. Even to watch, I was in tears, and I know many of my friends were as well.
Yeah. I also just want to add my support to her, and I think everyone should stand behind her. The courage that it takes to speak up after all that she went through, and then this happening as well, the courage that it takes to speak up, she's unbelievable.
She is unbelievable.
Israeli women are next level with their courage.
They really are, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so my hero this week are the firefighters that bravely fought these crazy fires that we had on our Independence Day. It was actually the eve of our Independence Day. It was our Memorial Day, where these fires were raging right outside Jerusalem. We still don't know whether it was weather plus arson plus stupid hikers leaving a barbecue behind, or a combination of all of it. Some people have been arrested, and we hope that people actually pay the price for what they did. Because you want to talk about eco-terrorism, that's eco-terrorism. But the only reason that actually people didn't get really seriously burnt and injured is because of the brave firefighters, one in particular, who on his bike, there's an image you'll see here, as he was riding his bike out of the flames. These firefighters, as so many other rescue workers in this country, are so brave. And the only reason that there's not people dead from these horrific fires that happen near where Shoshanna lives as well is because of our brave firefighters. So on top of having brave soldiers that we've spoken about, and brave policemen and brave women, we have some incredibly brave firefighters. So they're my heroes this week.
That's something that we also, by the way, I think learned from our unfortunately last horrible fires, and then we could learn just to connect it with you. Israel is very good at managing emergencies. We're less good at preventing emergencies. And it's a very frustrating thing for people who come from Western countries where we talk about prevention. So this time they evacuated a lot of people, and they did it very, Ms. Udar, thank you, and made sure that people got out of harm's way, didn't wait for it to happen. And I think that what you said, Emily, is really, really true, just to bring it all together, that if we are proactive and we look and say, where are we going wrong? That's that's a wonderful society, right? That's what we're taught to do as Jews. That's what we're taught to do when we say, what could go wrong? How do we prevent that? Look forward, make sure this doesn't happen. And I think we can do that. Also with this, like Emily said, teach your kids. Be that person that you want to see. Stand by victims and say to the media, this has to have follow through. We need to know what happens with this story, because this needs to be an example for other people. Just like the other fires were examples for this, that we will learn from and do better from. That's really what our jobs are.
So maybe we did something right about the fires and in prevention of accidents and terrible things that happened. So maybe we did learn something for this.
We did.
In any case, we'll keep learning and we'll keep informing you of all the wonderful things going on here, as well as the horrible things going on here also. But for this week, thank you so much for watching The Quad, only on JNS. See you next week.